Avatar: The Last Airbender is my favorite show of all time, and when I heard that there was going to be a live-action adaptation on Netflix, I was really excited, but I was also a little skeptical. Then the trailers came out, which made me even more excited. Even after the original creators left, even after they said that they would be toning down Sokka's sexism, even after they said that they wanted to appeal to Game of Thrones fans, I was still willing to give this show the benefit of the doubt. And it wasn't very good. Now, this adaptation is way better than the live action movie, and I know that's like saying, hey man, you got stabbed, but at least you didn't get shot. Like, it's not saying much, but it's true, this is much better than the movie. So first I'm going to talk about what I actually liked about this adaptation. So first off, I think they absolutely nailed the casting. The actors look practically identical to their cartoon counterparts. Some actors like Ian Owsley, who plays Sokka, and Dallas Liu, who plays Zuko, even sound similar to the original characters, and from the interviews the cast has done, you can see that they act a lot like their characters, and they have great chemistry with each other as well. The VFX look great as well. There are a few times where they don't look good, but they are consistent for the most part, and you can tell that this is a very high budget production. The bending looks great as well. Again, it is miles better than the movie. In the Netflix show, firebenders can create fire from their hands. They don't need a nearby source of fire to generate it, and it also doesn't take 6 adrenaline-injected earthbenders to slowly move a single rock. So yeah, the bending looks good. I also like that they incorporated martial arts into the action scenes along with the bending. The new flashback moments between Zuko and Iroh were very wholesome and added a lot more depth and meaning to their relationship. I also like that since this show is intended for a more mature audience, they're not held back by the PG rating. They're allowed to show a lot more violence, like we see people getting burned alive by the Fire Nation in this show. There's also a much greater emphasis on the genocide of the air nomads. I mean, that's literally what the show begins with, and this much darker tone helped establish the Fire Nation as a much more dangerous threat, which I really like. Music is another thing the show does really well. The composers take the iconic music from the animated show and elevate it to a much more cinematic level. There are some good changes in here as well, like the 41st Division change, the flashback scenes between Zuko and Iroh, like I said, and Katara's grandmother giving her the waterbending scroll. This just makes sense from a storytelling perspective, while also saving a lot of time as well. So now I'm going to move on to the characters. One of my favorite things about Avatar are the characters. They are some of the most well-written characters that I've seen in fiction. They're all flawed, have their own unique personalities developed throughout the series, and their backstories and dynamics are very well fleshed out, but the live action doesn't do justice to most of the characters. The characters in the live action are a shell of their animated counterparts, and this issue doesn't come from any of the actors, it comes from the writing and direction that they've been given. Now, I think the kid that plays Aang is perfectly cast, and he does a great job with what he's been given. The problem is that what he's been given isn't that good. Aang in the original show was a goofy kid. He wanted to go on side quests to avoid the responsibility of becoming the Avatar. Also, when he found out that he was the Avatar and that he would be separated from his mentor Monkey Atso, he runs away from home, ultimately leading to the extinction of his people. And as a result, he feels extremely guilty for abandoning them. But in the Netflix show, Aang doesn't run away. He just takes Appa out on a ride and just so happens to get caught in a storm. And while the realization that he's the last airbender is still sad, it's much less impactful because the emotional context isn't there. Aang also doesn't want to go on any side quests and just accepts the Avatar's responsibility in the first episode, something that he took a full season to accept in the cartoon. So overall, Aang in the show wasn't done great, but Katara is done much worse. Katara in the animated show is emotional, fierce, passionate, motherly, and we get to see her waterbending skills progress throughout the show, through her being trained by Master Pakku and practicing on her own. But in the Netflix adaptation, her waterbending skills vary depending on the situation that the team are in, and she also doesn't get trained by Master Pakku either. And then the show has the balls to call her a master.
You little peasant! You found a master, haven't you?
Yes. You're looking at her.
Live-action Katara is just like Rey, a Mary Sue, another strong female character. Not to mention that Discount Katara barely shows any emotion throughout the season. She feels very quiet and introverted, and it doesn't help that important character episodes like Imprisoned, which show Katara's passion and determination, are not included in this adaptation. Aang and Katara also don't learn waterbending, even though Book 1 is literally called Water. It's the season they're supposed to learn waterbending, how do you mess that up? Also, in the animated show, Pakku is portrayed as a sexist, and the only reason he agrees to train Katara is because he notices Katara's necklace. We learn that Pakku gave Katara's grandmother the necklace because of an arranged marriage, revealing that he is Katara and Sokka's grandfather. But in the live action, this emotional reveal doesn't happen. Katara just gives an inspirational speech to Pakku, which leads to him putting women on the front lines of an ongoing battle, even though these women are just healers and have never trained in combat. Also, Season 1 was the season that was supposed to develop Aang and Katara's relationship, but in the live action, most of the funny and emotional scenes between them are cut out. The show also combines episodes from Season 2 with Season 1. They do the Cave of Two Lovers episode from Season 2, but instead of having Aang and Katara going into the cave, it's Katara and Sokka. I guess now we know what they mean when they said they wanted to appeal to Game of Thrones fans. Anyways, let's move on to Sokka. Now, I thought Sokka was perfectly cast. Ian Owsley, the actor who portrays him, looks like him and sounds like him, and they keep Sokka's sarcastic personality. He did a great job with what he's been given, but again, the problem comes from the writing and direction. Most of Sokka's jokes in the live action are pretty forgettable, and he lacks the goofy charm and charisma the animated one had. Also, remember when they said that they were going to tone down Sokka's sexism? Well, they didn't do that. They just completely removed it. Even though the entire point of the Kyoshi episode was to have Sokka learn from his mistake and accept that he was wrong. But for some reason, writers nowadays don't want to give their characters flaws, even though flaws make characters more interesting and relatable. But anyways, let's move on to Azula. Now, this actress gets a lot of hate, when again, it wasn't her fault. It was the writer's fault for making Azula a whiny, sympathetic villain instead of the cold and intimidating villain that she is. It's only at the series finale when we see Azula having a mental breakdown. The reason this scene is so effective is because for most of the show, she was shown to be calm and calculated, so when we finally see her break down, we get to see who she truly is as a character. But this reveal won't be nearly as effective if Azula is portrayed as a sympathetic villain at the beginning. Also, May and Ty Lee are here. They don't really do anything, but they exist. Now, Zuko and Iroh are actually done very well. Liu Ten's funeral scene was a great addition, and it is probably the best moment in the entire live action. But that being said, I do think Zuko could have been handled a little better. I feel like they made him a little too open and vulnerable at the beginning, whereas in the animated show, he starts off as someone who's very closed off, but gradually opens up as the series continues. Also, his scar looks pretty bad. It looks like very obvious makeup, whereas in the animated show, it looked like a proper mark. But overall, Zuko and Iroh are done pretty well. But out of all the characters on the show, Fire Lord Ozai was done the best. He is perfectly portrayed by Daniel Day Kim. I just wish they kept the mystery with his character, because there are people that haven't seen the cartoon and are going to watch the live action first, so I think his appearance should have been kept a surprise for the newer fans. I also didn't mind that they made Ozai more sympathetic, because he is still an irredeemable monster, so it didn't really affect the story. Now, in this adaptation, we get to see both Avatar Roku and Avatar Kyoshi. The problem is that Kyoshi appears a lot more than Roku. She's the one that mainly guides Aang, when it should have been Avatar Roku. He is the avatar that came before Aang, so he's the one that has the strongest connection to him. And it's because of his actions that Aang has to deal with ending the 100-Year War. The reason Kyoshi showed up a lot more was probably because the studio wanted to push female empowerment, and even though Roku was barely shown in this series, they still managed to mess up his character by turning him into a comic relief, and I don't know why they did this. It was Roku's indecisiveness that caused the war in the first place. In the animated show, this is something that he feels extremely guilty about, as he should. Whenever Roku was talking to Aang in the animated show, he would never joke around, because why would he? It makes no sense for a character like Roku to be a comic relief. But by far, the worst character in this entire live action is Bumi. I hated what they did to Bumi in this show. In the cartoon, we don't know that this old king is actually Aang's childhood friend. He makes Aang do a series of challenges while Katara and Sokka are slowly being covered by crystals. He does this to train Aang to think outside the box, and Katara and Sokka being in danger added a lot of stakes to the situation. But in the live action, Katara and Sokka are not bound to the crystals, so there are no stakes, and Bumi isn't giving Aang these challenges to help him become a better avatar. He's doing it because he's mad at Aang for leaving. But his anger doesn't make any sense here, because Aang didn't even run away from home. What happened was a coincidence, but because this is a mature show, characters have to be angry with each other, whether it makes sense or not. This Bumi also reveals his identity to Aang when they first meet, so now there's no more mystery. What we are left with is a bitter old man arguing with a small child, and this is the exact opposite of who Bumi is. So overall, I'd give the show a 6 out of 10. It's not terrible, there are things to appreciate, but at the end of the day, this is just another rushed, exposition-heavy adaptation that missed the point of Avatar, and you'd be much better off just watching the animated series. Anyways, those are just my thoughts. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. And if you're a fan of animation, then you can check out Most Wanted. It's an original animated series that I spent 2 years working on, and a lot of people were involved with it, so please do check it out. A link to the full series will be in the description and in the pinned comment. Anyways, that's all I got. See ya.